Добрий день.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center. It's my pleasure to see all of you. My name is Olga Atamanova. It's day 831 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland. The situation with our power grid is becoming more and more critical, and now we will be talking exactly about that. We will be talking about the tariffs that are changing. We will be talking about repairs and maintenance and the outlook. Joining us in the studio is Oleksandr Kharchenko, director at the Energy Industry Research Center. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So, Mr. Oleksandr, just 2 weeks ago, we were saying that the situation might have improved by now, but the enemy inflicted yet another strike on our power grid, and it's quite the opposite that we're witnessing. The situation is critical. The emergency power shutdowns are in effect all across the country. So what are the consequences of the latest shelling, of the latest strike, and what is it going to change for us right now? So why are you saying it's critical? The situation is stable, more or less, within the last period. There were no critical changes lately. The fact that a number of emergency shutdowns happened due to the latest strike that were actually mitigated within an hour. I mean, the high voltage networks, the facilities that were destroyed, but anyway, the power supply was reestablished within 1 hour. But talking about the generation, yes, the process of destroying our generating capacities is underway, but we have to recognize that this is what we were forecasting, that the strikes on the generation facilities will be aimed at thermal generation capacities, and the enemy also is trying to inflict the maximum damage on hydro generation facilities, and this, basically they continue implementing this same scenario. This talking about the critical extent of the situation. Well, it's not critical, it's manageable. Those shutdowns that happened right after the attacks, they helped us stabilize the situation to reestablish the electricity supply within the shortest period possible, and everything that could be done promptly was done in effective manner. The main problem now is the lack of generating capacities in the system, but honestly, everything we can do is get used to this as a normal state of things. So within the 2 years to come, but I think that horizon is a little bit different. We have to do the maximum we can do within the next 2 years, and within from 2 to 5 years, we will be able to rebuild the generation to the extent when there will be no restrictions for the consumers. So this is basically my forecast for the full reconstruction. Before that moment, we will be living under the regime of restrictions from 4 to 6 hours all across the country, and for Kyiv it will be 6 to 8 hours within a day, and it will be normal. Okay, so we understand that for the next 2 years we have to get used to daily shutdowns as a standard and not a critical situation. Well, yes, they probably will not be daily because it will depend on a number of parameters such as weather, temperature, the season of the year, because it's clear in winter it's more difficult. The demand for electric power will be growing. The winter period will be more difficult, but I'm still confident that all of the critical infrastructure will have power supply, water supply, sewage networks, everything will remain in operation, just like hospitals and transport networks. And then June or July and probably first 2 decades of August will be difficult due to the temperature, due to air conditioning, cooling. And it's not only about consumers and air conditioners, because, for example, food manufacturing facilities will have to continue to operate, because you cannot work with meat, for example, with the temperature of 40+ degrees. So everything will continue as a normal preparation to heating season, because in winter we will have no right to mistake. Well, you've segregated Kyiv and Kyiv region. Why is situation more complicated here? Well, look how this algorithm of power supply works all across the country. We have the system operator, Ukrenergo, who has the technique approved by the government. According to this technique, they supply the available electric power all around the regions of Ukraine in compliance with the consumption forecast. So if some region has 100 for forecast and the actual consumption is 0.9, they will be allocated 90 megawatts. And in case of Kyiv, the situation is such that all of the regions first cover their critical infrastructure from the total supply of electric power, and then they distribute that supply over other consumers. And Kyiv, as a capital, has a lot of critical infrastructure, very diverse critical infrastructure, and the percentage of consumption of critical infrastructure in Kyiv is significantly higher than all around the rest of the country. This is why the Kyivites, the small and medium sized businesses of Kyiv, which do not belong to critical infrastructure, they get a little bit smaller percentage comparing to other regions. This is the reality. Mr. Oleksandr, there's a lot of discussions among the population. I'm not talking about the expert society, whether the shutdowns are real necessary. And one of the topics that is being discussed is experts as a consequence or precondition for the power shutdowns. Can you please explain this topic for our listeners? Is it really so that expert influences the shutdowns? Well, lately we don't have any expert, and we don't expect to have any shortly. Well, there is physical flow, but our power grid is severely damaged. This is why sometimes the electric power is flowing from one region of Ukraine to another one through European countries. It's a little bit of exaggeration, but it's a good reflection of reality. Because sometimes when we need to supply some electric power to Odessa region, it's easier to supply it to Slovakia, for example, from Western Ukraine, or Hungary or Poland, and then to get it back from Romania to feed Odessa region. So yes, there is physical flow, but we don't have export for a pretty long time, and that tiny small export that existed before the beginning of May, it was only based on solar energy. When we had excessive sun during the day, we were exporting that power. Before and after that, there was no export, and it has nothing to do with the power shutdowns. In my opinion, it's either a provocation or by the provocation made by Muscovites, or people just don't understand the situation and they need to be explained it. And this is, I think, what we're doing right here. Right, and now I would like to touch upon the topic of tariffs hike. It was discussed for a pretty long time. The experts were saying it was real necessary, but on the other hand, we understand that there are consumers who don't like any tariff hikes in one way or another. So to what extent the current tariffs are in accord with the market prices of generation? Look, no price can be in accord with the market as long as it's not a market price. So yesterday in the night, the market price was at the level of 1 hryvnia 30 kopecks. Then at 9 in the evening, it was 9 hryvnia. This is why the market price and any tariff have no connection, and they have nothing to do to the intrinsic cost. We have to understand that the cost of electric power is pretty difficult to calculate. Say you have a wind power station and there is strong wind, for example, when the sun is good, and it means that they can generate something, but they get zero because there is an oversupply of the electric power in the market. And talking about the tariffs, I think that this solution was absolutely incorrect. It has no context. It was not pretty well discussed. It will not generate profit to rebuild generating capacities because the majority of that money will be going to Energoatom. All that amount, all that extra amount, which will be about 50 billion, it will be almost all channeled to Energoatom. 15% will be going to Ukrenergo because their capacities are pretty severely damaged, but the rest will come to Energoatom. Energoatom has no significant damage resulting from battle operations, from enemies' attacks. So in my opinion, before proceeding to any tariff hikes for the population, it would be right to rebuild the system to make sure that that money can be channeled for rebuilding of the generating capacities and then proceed to tariff hikes. And after explaining it all to the people why it happens so, how this money would work for rebuilding of the generating capacities, only after that proceed to tariff hike. So unfortunately, before that decision was taken, I was criticizing it, and after it was taken in that format, as it was, in my opinion, they could not have taken the more wrong decision. So basically, we're not talking about the tariff hike, but about the money being channeled to the wrong place. Yes, exactly. And the amount of hike is a total riddle for me. Why exactly that amount? No one can explain it. So is it too low or too high in your opinion? It's just wrong. It's just wrong, in my opinion. The way it should work, the correct approach should look like that. We have to equalize all of the prices in the market to enable or to have the population transferred to the market conditions and provide the vulnerable categories of population with the clear mechanism of subsidies at the amount that they need. I'm confident, well, not that I'm confident, but I know that there is a number of mechanisms developed that allow doing so in a transparent and clear manner. In some cases, we were even getting some amounts from donors, pretty big amounts, but otherwise it doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? Well, you should rather ask someone else. So again, targeted subsidies and market price. So one reason for that is corruption. As long as there is any tariff in effect that does not reflect the real market situation, there will be people who would illegally and dishonestly make money on that. And here we're talking about hundreds of millions of hryvnia. And reason number two is discussed for a long time by those people who fight for energy efficiency. Just as long as people don't understand the real price of electric power in the market, they would never start saving electricity. And some of the approaches of Ukrainians to electric power consumption look absolutely wild from point of view of Europeans and Americans who know the real price of electric power in the market. And as long as we don't do it, we're not gonna fix this field. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. In case you have any questions, please start asking your questions. Good afternoon, Vladislav Obuch, Ukrinform. I'm having one general question. Don't you think that the tariff hike for non-commercial consumers to a certain extent may catalyze someone's desire to catalyze the tariff hike for businesses? And talking about the plans of Kyiv to install 6 module thermal power plants before the beginning of the new heating season, how real is it in view of the fact that such type of products cannot be bought in epicenter? And even if our international partners will help us with that equipment to install it, we will need about half a year at least. Well, look, talking about the first question, I don't think so. The market is market. Electric power for businesses will cost just as much as it does cost, as long as the consumer is ready to pay. All of the mechanism is based on the price that the consumers are ready to pay. The more they can pay, the higher the price. Under the deficit conditions, definitely the prices are supposed to grow. If anything is missing in the market, the price for it grows. Thanks God, there is market in place there. Talking about your second question, look, the answer should be divided in two parts. First, 6 small cogeneration plants that are being installed. It's real to install them. They are real small, and I know that Kyiv is working intensely and in the right way to reinforce the power grid of Kyiv. There's a lot of projects on the way there. Not all of them can be discussed in media, but there are many projects going on there, and I see very intense work of Kyiv Municipal Administration and Ukrenergo and Kyivenergo. There are donors and lenders involved. A lot of work is being done, and when I'm saying about 2 years as the first step on the way of improvement of the situation, Kyiv is among the leaders in this process. A lot of things are being done and being done in the right way. Another question. Good afternoon. My name is Lydia Serdyuk, 5th channel. I would like to get back to the issue of the tariff hikes. You've explained that it's not quite relevant and efficient to change the tariff in a way like this, but having this new tariff in effect now, can you please explain what it would result in? To what extent can it improve the situation to cover the deficit? And what are we going to have? Which situation is it going to result in at the beginning of the heating season? Well, it's not a question you should ask me, well, but rather to those who develop the tariff. But you, as a specialist, as an expert, can you explain? Well, I'm saying it would not influence the rebuilding of the generating capacities within the shortest period. So it's not going to change anything shortly? No, absolutely. So who of the government authorities, which of the government authorities can influence change of tariff? Look, that's the Ministry of Energy and National Committee for Regulation of Energy Supplies and Communal Utility Services. Dear colleagues, if we have any more questions on the floor, please. Maria Vasilyeva, 1+1 Studio, you've touched upon the topic of this winter. We understand that enemy is not going to stop. The critical infrastructure will continue being attacked. Can you forecast what's on for us under the worst case scenario, what the situation may end in, how it can develop? Well, I see no preconditions to talk about an apocalypse scenario or any man-made disasters. I'm confident that the power grid will continue being resilient. Yes, we've lost a major fraction of generation capacities, but we have understanding of what we should do, how should we work, how to ensure that the critical infrastructure continues operating, and a lot of work is being done to implement this understanding. Yes, there is no magic stick to rebuild it immediately, but there's a lot of work on the way, and we have to recognize it. In my opinion, the worst case scenario for this winter is restriction for the consumers up to 6 to 10 hours per day. But in this case, all of the critical infrastructure will continue operating along with the heat supply, water supply, sewage facilities operating, as well as key defense industry facilities. So again, I don't expect any critical situations this winter. I'm seeing a lot of work being done by a lot of mayors, a lot of the cities in terms of preparation. It doesn't mean we have to just lean back and relax. It means that everybody continues working intensely in terms of preparation to the winter. I'm talking about both mayors and reserve capacities and preparation to increase of import of electric power, and a lot of work being done by Ukrenergo, who are involved in preparation of high voltage aerial networks and the rest of facilities, and a lot of work being done on rebuilding of the generating capacities. Some of the generating capacities will be rebuilt by the following winter. So I'm more inclined to state about difficult winter. It will be more difficult than the previous one, 100%, but in my opinion, in the same way, it will be more comfortable and more predictable than a winter before that, because if you recall October, November, December, say January of the years 22-23, the coming winter will be easier. Mr. Oleksandr, we know that the summer season is the season for the scheduled maintenance of our power plants. Well, it's a classified information, in fact, but I know that the works are underway. The reactors are being decommissioned for maintenance and recommissioned before the schedule. I know that the engineers of Energoatom work quite intensely in this area, and I'm sure they will have all of their reactors prepared in a timely manner. Thank you, dear colleagues. Do we have any more questions on the floor? If not, then I would like to thank you for this broadcast. It was a really important topic. Thank you for all of your explanations. Let me remind you, dear colleagues, joining us was Oleksandr Kharchenko, Director at the Energy Industry Research Center. And at 13:30, we will be talking about the situation in the south of our country, in the Black Sea and Sea of Azov. So stay tuned. Let's continue working together for our victory, and glory to Ukraine.